Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the IAM CX Podcast. I am Roger Nicholas, Director of Customer Experience at Island Analytics and Marketing. And today's guest is a powerhouse. I am excited to have him here because, quite frankly, he is hard to get. His time is very, very premium. But today's discussion is going to focus on the difference between customer obsession and customer centric, and why you need to know the difference. All right. Our guest today is Marbue Brown, Mr. Marbue Brown, who is the author of the book, The Blueprint for Customer Obsession. And he's also the founder of the Customer Obsession Advantage. It's a firm dedicated to helping companies achieve extraordinary business results through customer obsession. He's an accomplished executive with a track record of thought leadership and signature business results at some of the most iconic companies on the planet. And this is no understatement, okay? It includes JP Morgan Chase, it includes Amazon.com, Microsoft, and Cisco Systems. Marbue's book, The Blueprint for Customer Obsession, has been recognized as one of the top 10 business books for 2022 by Forbes. His thought leadership has been featured in premier media outlets such as Fox Business, CNN Business, Go Banking Rates, Yahoo Finance, the New York Post, the Baltimore Sun, SHRM, and Quick Serve Restaurant Magazine. His expertise has been featured on some of the largest radio stations and networks across the US, as well as some of the most widely distributed syndicated radio programs that include Wharton Business Daily, The Morning with Gordon Deal, America in the Morning with John Trout, SiriusXM, iHeartRadio, KCBS, and KDKA. Additionally, Mr. Brown has been featured as a guest on top customer experience podcasts that include Amazing Business Radio with Shep Hyken, a CX guru, Be Customer Led with Bill Stykos, Delighted Customers Podcast with Mark Slayton, one of our previous speakers, and Press One for Nick, and introducing one of the greatest that's up and coming, the IAM CX Podcast. Yes, I gave myself a plug. Just deal with it, okay? But we are excited to have him here. He's a sought-after speaker and published author on customer experience, business strategy, and economic policy. So, ladies and gentlemen, give a warm IAM CX Podcast welcome to Mr. Marbue Brown, please. And if this were poetry, we would give you the snaps. We'd give you the snaps.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Roger. I'm excited to be on the IAM CX podcast, and I'm looking forward to having a stimulating conversation with you today.
Well, our audience is the one who's going to benefit here, and I'm really excited about that. I'm going to dive right in because I want to get as much time with you as possible. Mm-hmm. Now, we've talked about the heavy hitters in your experience, who are heavy hitters in business as well as customer experience. But tell us, what was the gap that you identified among customer experience books that led you to writing your latest work, The Blueprint for Customer Obsession?
Well, look, you may have seen in different magazines or outlets lists of the most customer obsessed companies. Mm-hmm. And you might ask yourself, what's the criteria that was used to decide that, right? How did people decide that these were the most obsessed companies or customer obsessed companies? Look, I've been in the business of customer experience for a very long time. I've seen all kinds of movements in customer experience. Mm-hmm. And when it got to the point that we started talking about customer obsession, I realized that there was something different about this. And so, when I look at these lists that talk about the most customer obsessed companies, I realize everybody's not speaking the same language when they talk about customer obsession. And so what I wanted to do was to identify the differentiators, right, that set apart the companies that are customer obsessed from companies that are otherwise maybe customer centric or customer focused, right? Mm-hmm. So that people will be able to understand, look, there is a quality that's different about these companies that sets them in a different category, right? Mm-hmm. And in the book, what I did was to take 10 companies where there would not really be a lot of a lot of debate about whether they fit the description of customer obsessed. And
Right.
then what I did was to show what's common across these companies, but also how those things that are common are different than other companies who are maybe otherwise customer centric or customer focused. So
Oh,
yeah.
okay. That's a great setup because that teases on my next question. That rolls perfectly in because customer centric and customer focuses are the sexy terms nowadays, especially for us in the Caribbean. Um, but is it enough to win in business still? And this is a three-part question. Is it enough to win in business still? How does customer obsession differentiate itself from those customer centricity or customer focus? And why is that difference so important?
Well, look, one of the things that I did in my book right from the outset is to give you some of the business results for companies that are in the customer obsessed categories. And when
Mm,
you look at these companies, their numbers are just completely out of sight, right? And that's one of the things that makes these companies different. Let's take, for example, Chick-fil-A, which is one of the 10 companies that we profiled in the book. If you look at, there was a recent article that showed that if you look at the average non-mall Chick-fil-A standalone
mhm.
location, its annual revenue is 8.7 million. I
Mm,
want you to stop and think about that number for a minute, right?
that's a lot of
Um,
chicken nuggets, Marbue. That's a lot of
that's
chicken.
right. But if you take um, a McDonald's that has been in business for 1 year,
Mm,
okay, we're looking at something like 3.7 million. So there's a
mm,
huge difference between a Chick-fil-A, how much one of them makes, and a McDonald's, right? And it has a lot to do with customer obsession. If you take
mm,
a look at Costco, another company that's profiled in the book, and you look at
mhm,
how it compares to its competitors, okay, in terms of the average size of a basket, it can be anywhere from 2.5 times the average size of a basket that people are checking out with. All right.
right.
So when you start looking at the business results for these companies, it's very different than other companies. Look, I
Mhm,
mean, um, if you go from 2014 to 2017, the Amazon stock price tripled. From
mhm.
2017 to 2020, it tripled again.
Wow.
Okay, so
Okay.
now look, when Amazon started out, and they were talking about customer obsession, and this phrase actually is a Jeff Bezos coined phrase, customer obsession, right?
Mm,
And they did some things that were really counterintuitive. And the bottom line is, customer obsessed companies tend to do some counterintuitive things. All
mhm,
right. And they did some things that were counterintuitive, and people thought these guys are nuts. Okay. But when you look at it, years later, you realize, hey, wait, they weren't nuts after all. They were operating on the basic principle that if it's good for the customer, it's good for business and it's going to
mhm.
pan out in the end, right?
Right. Right.
And so they might not have been able to, at that moment in time, connect all the dots and say, oh, this is the financial benefit I'm going to get. But the
Right.
financial benefits rolled in. And when they rolled in even bigger than, those companies might have even imagined, right?
Mm,
So, Amazon, um, based on the work that they did, let's take like putting the reviews out there.
right.
If you go to Amazon, you don't only see positive reviews, you see negative reviews too.
That's right.
And people would tell Jeff Bezos, why would you want to put negative reviews out there for something you're trying to sell?
Mhm,
Okay. And he said, well, we're not just making money. We don't make money when we sell things. We make money when we help people make great purchase decisions, right? I'm kind of paraphrasing, but that's basically the idea. Because if somebody buys something that's bad, it's coming back.
Correct.
And it's going to cost you money.
Cost more, yeah. Yeah.
Right? And so that's so they put those reviews out there. People write bad things sometimes, and those reviews stay out there because what happens? It builds customer trust.
Yeah.
And so customers know that they can trust what's going on there. And so if they're searching for something to buy, that made Amazon the #1 destination for product search on the internet. There's this tension you have between this whole notion of, going with something that is customer obsessed and basically what's the financial benefit. Bottom line is that the folks who have bet on the customer, nobody has ever bet wrong. Anytime people have bet on the customer, they bet right. And so, I gave you some of the financial benefits and everything, but we could go more. We could take a bunch of different examples and demonstrate that these companies in this category, their business results are just out of sight.
Well, let me just tease out this question, and since we're in that space, when it comes to what connects most with C-suite and what they care about, what are some of those outcomes that are compelling enough for C-suite to go, okay, I need to pay attention to this, because it's not just my competitors beating me as to why I should do this, but there's something else going on that we can actually reproduce and repeat.
Well, let me give you an example of something. So, and this is one of the things I actually bring out in the book. The whole thing about how customer obsessed companies count dollars that they invest in the customer experience towards their market, right?
Oh,
and I'll give you an illustration. Let's take a company like Costco. On a daily basis across all Costco locations, about 3 million people visit Costco in a day. Okay? You can pick a large bank, you can find 1 million people visit their branches in a day. I know people are talking about, people aren't using branches so much anymore, but in large banks, as many as 1 million people are visiting branches a day. Now I want you to think about something. Let's think about a cable network news program. How many people watch that program in an evening? A very highly rated one, maybe 3 million. Some of the lesser ones, more like 1 million. But here's the bottom line. People pay big bucks to get a 30-second spot on one of those programs. Now you're Costco, and somebody walks into one of your locations. Guess what? They don't spend 30 seconds in there. Okay? They spend a lot of time in there. And these companies, they spend a good bit of time in there. And for these companies, they've built a culture where the idea is you, the employee, you are the commercial, right? You're the commercial. And the experience that you deliver to the customer, that's what leaves with the customer. And that customer is, disseminating that information to lots of other people. Okay. And I'm telling you, look, the companies that are in this customer obsessed category, their customers are not casual consumers. They're rabid fans. All right.
Yeah.
I mean, like, for example, you might be crazy about a place you shop, but how many people ever think about having a wedding in a place where they shop? I don't think most people do that. Right?
Yeah, that's not...
Hey, but people have had weddings at Costco,
Wow.
yeah. So, it inspires something that's special about how these people feel with their connections to these companies, right? And so I bring that back because if you look at how much people spend on advertising on one of these cable network news. It could be $90-100 million a year. Okay. If your people are your commercial, they're part of your marketing dollars,
Yes.
right? You can basically calculate what the benefit is of that you're not spending on those commercials. That's an illustration, just a quick illustration of how you can convert these to dollars.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So two things are jumping out at me there. Well, one of them I want to highlight is it's important for organizations who want to be customer obsessed, not just customer centric, but customer obsessed. As you define it, it makes sense for them to have great relationships with their employees and for them to have opportunities to grow within those organizations. Because without that level of employee loyalty or employee engagement, that outcome that you just described can't happen on a consistent basis, right? Am I
Well,
right?
you're absolutely correct, right? Look,
Mhm.
employee obsession is basically a prerequisite for customer obsession. Those two
Mhm.
things kind of go hand in hand, right? And so if your employees are treated the way you want them to treat your customers, then your customers will be the beneficiaries of that. You will have this virtuous cycle going on where you're delivering a positive experience to your employees, and your employees are delivering a positive experience to your customers. So I'll give you another example. Pick your regular neighborhood grocery store. All right. You go in there, you're going to get a certain vibe from employees. Then pick Trader Joe's. And you go in there and you're going to get a different vibe from employees, right? You pick your regular neighborhood grocery store and you go in there, and the people who are working there, it's a revolving door,
Yeah.
right? You
Right.
go to Trader Joe's and you see the same people over and over. And those
Yeah.
people
Right.
are taking care of you with a different kind of vibe, right?
Right.
That's because they treat their employees a certain way. From pay to opportunities for advancement to how much experience they give them in all the different aspects of the store, how they
Right.
they coach them on product knowledge. A person in Trader Joe's who's on the floor is as good as a product specialist that's sitting behind the scenes for some other grocery chains, right? I mean, so these are the kinds of things that are different. How they even refer to each other in the store and all of that kind of thing as employees. These are all things that make a difference from the perspective of employees. But I could just go through, different companies, the incredible scholarship programs that they have for employees in a place like Chick-fil-A, for example. I mean, you could just go through the list. All of these companies have a very special relationship with their employees, and it in turn, the customers get reward. It benefits the customers. That positive energy goes back to the customers, and the customers can feel it.
Wow. Okay. I, I think our audience need to hear that detailed explanation, because employee engagement and even employee experience is something that we miss a lot in the Caribbean. And I believe a lot of companies, our audience comes from the US, Europe, Africa, Asia. Um, and I'm sure there are companies there that are missing that as well. So to hear you describe the depth and the breadth of that for the companies that are customer obsessed, that we know are killing it when it comes to revenue and growth and sustainability and that type of thing, it's important to hear. So thank you so much for that.
Absolutely.
Your background is heavy on customer experience analytics and math, and that gives you an appreciation for data that most people don't have. But why is capturing data so important, and why is turning insights into action so key? Can you share a couple of examples, just like you did before, about
Well,
customer obsessed?
let me start by using this opportunity to kind of talk about customer focused, customer centric, customer obsessed, right? Look, customer focused companies may be great at collecting feedback from customers,
Mm.
but are not necessarily great at turning those feedback into actions,
Mm.
right? Customer centric companies might take that one step further. But in a customer obsessed company, it's like a well-oiled machine
Mhm.
where when they collect that feedback, they're able to turn that into actions that make a difference for customers, right? Now,
Right.
give you an example of something. Whole Foods.
Yep.
Whole Foods, of course, is part of Amazon.
Right.
And you can go into Whole Foods and on your phone with the Whole Foods app, you can use your Prime membership, okay,
Mhm.
and get discounts and stuff like that.
Mm.
So I remember I went into Whole Foods, one time, and when they first started doing that, and I scanned in my Prime membership, and when it's time to pay, I take out my wallet and I put a card. So I said, you know what, this just shouldn't be this way.
Mhm.
So I sent email back to one of my former Amazon colleagues and said, "Hey, look, man, when I take out my phone to scan in um, my Prime membership,
Membership.
I should not have to take anything out because my Prime membership has a card attached to it."
Correct.
Right? Okay.
Correct.
Now, I don't know if it's my tip that caused them to do this, but if you go into a Whole Foods now, you don't have to do that anymore. You can just hit a button and confirm that you want to use your Prime membership card and you're done. Right? Now, the
Okay.
thing for me is, as a former Amazon employee,
Mhm.
I knew that this was something that Amazon could act on and turn into, like a real live, application for
Sure.
customers. That,
Right.
that's kind of how the system just works.
Mhm.
Customers
Mhm.
give feedback, and they turn it into action, right? And all of these companies that are in this category, they're great at being able to do that sort of stuff. They
Yeah.
they don't just collect the data, but they turn the data into action.
Right. Right. Awesome. Awesome. That is definitely a weakness for us in the Caribbean. We're not really bent towards um, capturing data for insights. It's more of a box checker, kind of thing. We know we need to capture some information, and then we may give a report, and it dies in that report. Sometimes it dies on the desk before it's even open because it's just a report that's being done. Um, so then
Yeah, but let
I
me
want.
let me let me go one step further with that. Again,
Okay.
because that kind of highlights this difference between customer focused, customer centric, and customer obsessed, right? So
Okay.
in companies that are customer obsessed, okay, these results, they're an integral part of business reviews. Okay, so when executives are giving their business reviews, this thing about the voice of the customer is an important part of the business review. But the thing about those business reviews is they don't just, like put up the numbers. Okay. What happens is that there are actions that are defined as a result of putting up those numbers, and then those actions are tracked in future business reviews, right?
Okay.
And so, it's like when you have these business reviews, people know that, hey, if there are commitments that are made, if there are actions that are committed to, they are going to go and act on those things because they know they're coming back and they have to give an
Yeah.
update on what's going on. In
That's
other
right.
places, it's just a readout.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. That's an important nugget, ladies and gentlemen. All of our audience, regardless of where you're from. Um, so then I want to dive into a quote from you. Um, what wows customers before becomes yesterday's news. Do you still believe that, and why?
Well, look, let me tell you something about that. So, what you do with customers actually affects their expectations, right? And so what happens is if you think about something that wows a customer, typically the thing that wows a customer is something that they don't expect. All right. So
Right.
in the book, one of the things I have is I have like the 4 principles of wow. Okay.
Okay.
Like wow moments happen when companies show up for their customers in key life moments, right? And look, there's certain things that you expect from a company, but you don't necessarily expect the company, say, to be there for you when you're bereaved, or you don't necessarily,
Yes.
so these are the kinds of things. When a company does something that is unexpected, that typically translates into a wow moment.
Yes.
But the thing about that is, if the company does that consistently, then people aren't wowed because they come to
No, no.
expect. So their expectations get a reset,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's why I say that what's wow today, is yesterday's news tomorrow, because people's their expectations get a reset, and so when they get that reset, now they're expecting on a different level, right? And so that is something that you have to take into account.
But that also has an underlying thing that I don't want our audience to miss. In order to surpass your customers' expectations, ladies and gentlemen, you have to understand what they are now. What's the baseline? And that goes back to what we were talking about when it comes to capturing data towards insights and action. Because now, if I understand the expectations of our customers, then I can design an experience or process that allows them to not only meet their goals and their expectations, but to surpass it. And and then I'll still be capturing the data to know that my new expectation has now become a reset and a new baseline. And so I now need to exceed that. But then I will also know how to what ways I and what avenues I can use to then exceed those expectations. So I really appreciate you diving into that the way you did. Um, a not so new but often ignored part of customer experience, Marbue, is understanding of emotional connection. Do you highlight the value or the ROI of building an emotional connection in your book? And what are some actions that some of the icons have taken to solidify emotional connection?
Okay, so let me say something, because when I in the book where I talk about the different customer obsession differentiators,
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm gonna start with 3 of them. Okay, engage personally, deliver exceptionally,
Mm-hmm.
connect emotionally. And you
Ah,
can see that third one is all around emotional connections. And then we break it down further and we say, look, there's a couple of ways that we connect emotionally. One of those ways is by creating wow moments.
right,
The other way is by making things right when something goes wrong.
right, right.
Okay? So wow moments. Let me give you an example of something that's a wow moment. Right. So a lady was, she had recently gotten married. She and her husband were moving. They're packing up. So she had some jewelry, and she asked her husband to pack this jewelry away, right? Well, her husband went and took this and put it in a box that he thought she was not using. Well, it was a Zappos box that she was planning to use to return some things to Zappos, right? So they get to their new house and
No
she
jewelry.
can't find her jewelry. And then all of a sudden they realize what has happened. And he's put all her jewelry in this box that's been shipped back to Zappos, right? So they call up the rep who takes the call at Zappos, reroutes that box to his desk.
Uh,
Okay. Then he proceeds to buy a plane ticket and flew there and hand delivered her jewelry because he didn't want any mishaps with her jewelry.
Wow.
Now, again, in most companies, people would think that that is absolutely positively insane, right?
Yeah, that's an option. That's not even an option.
It's not even an option. But in Zappos, this rep usually had the full backing of the company to be able to do something like that. Now that creates an emotional connection. That's a wow moment if there ever was one. Okay.
And they stick the marriage too, because
Yeah.
my guy could have been single in this story, and Zappos saved his marriage. They probably have more kids than they planned for as a result of that. So that's
Yeah, really. So, but let me give you another one.
uh-huh.
This one is Nordstrom. So there's a lady who spent an evening shopping in Nordstrom, trying clothes on, all this sort of stuff. And, she makes her purchases, leaves the store, and realizes that her engagement ring is lost.
Mm.
Okay. So she comes back to the store. She's looking all around. This guy sees her looking all around and asks her what it's about. She tells him what it's about. They look all over the place. They can't find an engagement ring. So finally she gives up and goes home. Right? So this guy says to all the cleaning people, bring the vacuum cleaners. So they empty the vacuum cleaners and they find this engagement ring, right? Okay. And then, he delivers the lady's engagement ring to her. That's a wow moment.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
like, let me tell you, you are going to have to go around the world before you get this woman to ever say anything negative about Nordstrom, right?
That is correct.
These things create like visceral, positive connections. And I can go on. Let me tell you, one of the things that saved Southwest last year when they had all those kind of debacle with the meltdown, or in 2020, not 2023, but 2022, when they had that, is they had so much goodwill in so much stored up in the goodwill bank for their customers, right? Yeah. There was a lady who flew to Costa Rica for a destination wedding. She was a bridesmaid in the wedding. Got there and realized she left her bridesmaid dress in the States. Okay, so she's calling up all the delivery companies, the names of all of them, to see if they could get her the bridesmaid dress, in time for the wedding. None of them could do this. And she hits Southwest up on Twitter, and they got her that bridesmaid dress in time for the wedding. Okay, see, these are, and you know what you're saying, right, Roger? You're saying, wow.
Yeah, exactly.
because these are wow moments, right? And some people would think this is crazy. This is not sustainable. And you can say, but how come these companies sustain this stuff? Like how do they do it? They sustain this and their financials are still off the charts. Why is that?
Yep. Because they get the credit. They get the credit for that loyalty and that emotional connection. They get the referrals, they get the repurchases, they get the upsell, they get the cross-sell from that customer. Shucks. Nordstrom probably has a child running around right now called Nordstrom because of what they did for that lady who was getting engaged. That's incredible. That is wow. Okay. I think you more than answered that question for our audience. Wow. Okay. Wow. Okay. I can't stop saying wow now. Okay. I gotta stop. All right. Okay. So another question. In your experience or research, what are the business outcome reasons for becoming customer obsessed? And you've mentioned many of them already before, but and what are the markers? I think more importantly, what are the markers that some of these icons have used to determine that their customer obsession strategy is taking them towards business outcomes they want? Because you mentioned before, they may have this customer obsessed idea that seems counterintuitive, and they may not necessarily know the end goal. They just know it's going to be better than what's being currently done by everybody else. But they must have come up with some type of, and what I'm getting to is C-suite, if they make a decision to take on a strategy, they can't predict the end, but they need something that gives them confidence that it's heading in the right direction. So that's the genesis of my question there. Can you help us with that?
Well, usually they try to predict the end. And so
Mhm.
as a result of that, sometimes they pass on doing some things that they know they ought to do. Okay. And customer obsessed companies don't do that. Customer obsessed companies let the customer break the tie in those business decisions. They don't just let the numbers break the tie. So like
Mhm.
I'll give you an example of something. You have a IVR system that people use to call up, right? It's working. It's inexpensive.
Mhm.
But you know that the better experience for your customer is that they never have to wait on hold, that they can save their place in the queue and hang up and have a call come back to them when somebody's ready to talk to them. Okay. Well, some people would say, the ROI doesn't seem to justify that we should make this change to the IVR at this time. But the customer obsessed company makes that change and they get rewarded for it because it's a better experience for their customers. And their customers always talk about the positive experiences, right? So, look, we recently did some research where we looked at how often people talk about negative experiences and how
Mhm.
often people talk about positive experiences. And here's a interesting thing for you to take into account. Look, negative experiences, you don't really want people out there talking about negative experiences. It's not a great scenario.
Yeah, it's not sexy.
But,
No.
but what we found is that people talk about negative experiences less than people talk about positive experiences. And so the
Mhm.
people with negative experiences, you know what they do? They quietly vote with their feet and they go
That's right.
somewhere else, right? And so, if you're measuring attrition, all right, you're gonna see some of that kind of stuff going on because people are voting with their feet.
They're going.
Whereas, with the positive experiences, those folks are bringing their friends, right? And so you've got that kind of, uh, like different kind of dynamic going on
Two
when you
different
um,
forces
yeah,
happening at the same time that you have control over. Some
yeah.
measure of control. Yeah.
But let
Um,
me let me give you an even more concrete example. Look, in
mhm.
business, one of the things that businesses measure meticulously is returns. And they're
Mhm.
all trying to minimize returns.
All right.
Then you've got Costco.
Mhm.
And Costco takes anything back,
Everything back. Yeah.
you know?
No
And you
questions asked.
you say to yourself, is that even reasonable? Some people say, is that even possible? In fact, some guy posted on TikTok or somewhere the other day something to almost kind of make fun of Costco's return policy, right? But you know something? Sometimes just because of that policy, you have a choice to buy something at Costco and you have a choice to buy it somewhere else. And you say to yourself, I'm buying that at Costco. Because if I have a problem with it, I know
Yeah.
I can take it back. Now, the thing is, Costco is also meticulously pushing for top quality.
Mhm.
So they're trying to minimize the number of scenarios where people have to take stuff back anyway.
Right.
So you're buying there because you think if I have a problem, I can take it back. But
Yeah.
chances are you
You won't
don't
have to
have a
take it back.
problem
Yeah.
because they're holding the companies that they're dealing with to a higher standard to give them stuff that people don't need to
Right.
bring back,
That's
right?
right.
So, but you have this whole group of people who are coming there because they have that belief that they can shop with confidence, that if they have a problem, they can always bring it back.
That's right.
And so those are some of the kind of markers that these companies are looking at. So you
Mhm.
look at Costco's, paid memberships and stuff like that, 100 million plus and that sort of stuff and growing. Those are markers that tell you, right, this is working.
We're heading in the right direction. And something I wanted to underscore that you mentioned earlier with regard to, delighted or happy customers who are, loyal, they tell their friends, 72% of the time there's research out there that says 72% of the time they tell 6 to 9 other people. So in addition to their transaction and they staying longer, they go tell friends who become customers. And on the flip side, those customers who are unhappy and disappointed with their experience with you, the research out there says 1 in 26 actually file a complaint. That means 96% of them walk out the door with their wallet and with a bad reputation ready to share with somewhere between 9 and 16 people 50% of the time. So the Costco's and the customer obsessed icons of the world, let me label it that way. Customer obsessed icons of the world understand that dynamic, understand those forces. That's why they track what they track. That's why they hold vendors to a higher standard of accountability, so that you don't give me products that keep being returned. They probably have a return threshold if we buy products from you, so that they know, just like in retail, we had a shrink threshold, how much we might lose to theft. If a branch is over that threshold, we have a problem, because we know it's cannibalizing, revenue and profit.
So let me give you an example. Something I worked on when I was at Amazon, something called the Customer Experience and-on Court. Okay. Now, what was and-on Court all about? It's about some of the same things, very things that we're talking about now. Suppose we were selling a microwave. All right. And that microwave kept conking out. Mm-hmm. And people had to keep returning it. Right? Well, that's a bad experience for customers. Now, what the and-on Court group did, and we use all kinds of sophisticated statistical models and all those kinds of things, was that we would pull items and say, hey, until this particular aspect of this item is fixed, it can't be sold anymore. Okay. Now understand that basically what we're saying is nobody's making money off this stuff until you can solve this problem, right? And we pulled our fair share of items, on an annual basis, and made corrections. And the correction could be a bunch of different things. It could even just be how it was packaged. Maybe something wasn't packaged right, and so it wasn't getting to the customer. But we could figure that out. We could fix that and then put it back in circulation again. And sometimes you might say, you know what? This problem's not going to get fixed. This thing doesn't go back into circulation.
Right.
Okay. And so again, that is one of those kinds of things that gives people the ability to shop with confidence.
Mm-hmm. Build that trust, build that emotional connection.
Yeah.
Build that loyalty expression of buying more, staying longer, telling friends.
Yeah. And let me give you, forgive me, I'm just, all these examples are pouring out of me, right? But let me give you an example.
I will not stop you. Go ahead.
So think about something like buying a case for your iPhone, right? Okay. Early on, people used to have problems where they would buy a case and it couldn't fit their phone, right?
Right.
And hey, we pull and-on cords for those kinds of things, but figure out that detail page needs to be fixed. And so now when you go on one of those detail pages, you'll see something that says, this case, if it's this, these are the models that it fits. If your model's not one of them, don't buy this case, right? Yeah. I mean, so these are the kinds of things that these companies are doing, that, they are troubleshooting, constantly, updating, innovating, all of those kinds of things to get, the the products, the services, all those kinds of things to the optimum level for the customer experience.
Right. Okay. All right. So just a couple of questions left because I wanna get you home because I know you're busy. Um, in your book, The Blueprint, you describe something called the customer obsession continuum. Could you define that for our audience? And since we have many small to medium sized enterprises in our audience, are there some transferable approaches from that continuum they can adopt that can guide them towards being customer obsessed?
Well, let me tell you this. So we've already been kind of alluding to the customer obsession continuum a little bit all the way through this call, right? Because what we have in the book is kind of like a continuum of 5 stages. So you essentially have the companies that are customer indifferent. They're not really paying that much attention to their customers at all. They became successful because they met the customer need initially, but now it's all about just milking that franchise, right? But they're not really attuned to their customers, right? Then you got the group that's customer aware, okay? And so those guys, they have this mental assent to the importance of customer experience, but they're not doing much to kind of cultivate that. When you get to customer focus, you might have an organization where the C-suite, they're really attuned to customer experience, but that message is not permeating the entire organization. Okay. And so you get to the customer centric company, and maybe it's the C-suite and the plus ones to the C-suite, maybe even the plus twos, but still it doesn't make it all the way through the organization. When you get to the customer obsessed company, everybody's on the same page. Everybody understands what the North Star is. Everybody understands, what is that experience they're looking to deliver to the customer. So, in one of the companies I was in, we used to talk about surround sound, right? Customer obsession was talked about in all of the different forms of communication. So when executives talked about it, when they're plus ones, plus twos, everybody talked about it. And, that was part of how the organization ran. Just today I was talking to somebody about a practice that we had called #ThankYouThursday. All right. And, I should straight out come out and say that Marbue Brown was the originator of #ThankYouThursday. And on Thursdays, as CEO, people would be highlighted all the way across the organization. Remember, that's the entire branch network at Chase, and people would be highlighted, excuse me, and send a thank you that everybody could see, right? Well, then not only did she do #ThankYouThursday, but her directs did #ThankYouThursday, and the next layer. And so that message permeates the entire organization, to show gratitude to the people who are delivering. Well, how do you think people feel when they get a thank you from the CEO? How do you think they feel when they get a thank you from the chief administrative officer or the chief marketing officer? And so when that goes through the organization, you see. So you remember we're talking about that special relationship that people have with their employees. Well, that makes like a huge difference, right? So when you look at that continuum that I talked about, you could see how going across from indifferent to aware to focused to centric to obsessed. Okay, there's a difference in how those folks operate. Earlier in the conversation, we talked a little bit about business reviews and how in some of the companies, the voice of the customer is, it might be an agenda item, but it doesn't translate into follow-up actions.
Right.
And and in some cases, even when it translates into follow-up actions, it doesn't have follow-up tracking, right? But in the
Right.
obsessed companies, you have that, right?
Right.
And so that's one of the things we deal with in the book. We talk about that whole continuum of how you have these different behaviors in the obsessed company versus the customer centric or customer focused or customer aware companies. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm giving you a few examples, but we have like a full continuum, in the book that lays out in pretty substantial detail what are some of the differences in behaviors of the way these companies operate on a day-to-day basis.
So I want to take this opportunity then to tell our audience that we've given you more than enough reasons to dive into customer obsession, but more importantly, we're giving you great reasons to own the blueprint customer to customer obsession, right? So Marbue, tell folks where they can get your books online or in brick and mortar.
Well, look, certainly, easy place to get a copy of Blueprint for Customer Obsession is on Amazon. But look, wherever books are sold. So Barnes and Noble, you can get it on in Apple Bookstore as like electronic version. There's a
Okay.
Kindle version of it. So wherever books are sold, you can get a copy of Blueprint for Customer Obsession. And look, more about what I do is on the site customerobsession.net, not .com, .net. Okay.
Okay.
And if you go over to customerobsession.net, you'll see ways that you can, get a hold of this book and other things that, the company is doing,
Okay.
Customer Obsession Advantage. And very soon we're going to be releasing results from our Customer Obsession Barometer, which is another thing that we're working on. So, yeah.
Awesome. Mr. Marbue Brown, thank you. Thank you for joining us on this cause, on this passion, on this adventure. See, at IAM, we think we can save the world with customer experience. So you being a part of this process, as crazy as that may sound to some people on this listening right now, we firmly believe that, especially for us in the Caribbean. So we thank you so much for taking the time, for sharing your insights, your wisdom. And man, we thank you for the blueprint. I'm a big hip hop fan. And so the blueprint is one of those iconic albums from Jay-Z that kind of put hip hop in a different direction. So when I heard the blueprint, the first thing I thought of is, bumping a little bit, but I knew it's something we had to see. So thank you so much for sharing this with us. Thank you so much for coming to the IAM CX podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us in this episode of the IAM CX podcast. I am Roger Nicholas, your host, Director of Customer Experience at Island Analytics and Marketing. Thank you for joining us. Share, like, tell everyone. And again, a standing ovation to Marbue Brown. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate spending this time with you. It's been a blast.
All right. Have a great day, folks, and go win.